Good evening and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds, Hunter Chronicles. Tonight I'm going to delve into a weekly overview of what I find to be Mandalay Bay staff activity. It's activity from the perspective of the shooting and Stephen Paddock. Places and times and people and whatnot where Paddock had the potential to interact with these staff members, or vice versa, where the staff members had the opportunity to interact with Stephen Paddock. Now, not all staff members are included in this chart. For example, the slot attendants aren't included. I don't really go into much detail about the valet cashiers, and there's a few others that aren't mentioned. For example, I don't talk about crews and Taurus for the 29th, or for their testimony in which they gave that the cops essentially discarded. But generally speaking, I try to cover all bases, both from a perspective of the employee and from the perspective of the guest. And this all came about because in my investigation of the 29th, I kept running up against the age-old question: how credible is this statement, or how credible is this assertion, or this inference, or this piece of information that is supposedly quote-unquote evidence? And oftentimes, to answer that, I had to look at a bigger picture to see what the habits of Paddock were, to see what the habits of the staff are, and to gauge accordingly. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I'll start out, as usual, by having the nice little graphic here that sets the framework for this. This is for the whole week, from the 25th to the 1st. And we're going to be looking at specifically Mandalay Bay staff activity. So this all starts out with the habits and the patterns, and it tosses in a little commerce to explore the staff activity. So here it is. The main result of trying to locate and characterize the staff activities ended up with this chart, which consists of 7 individual timescale charts all merged into one big chart, but only showing the entries for the staff as they would have or might have interacted with Paddock. So there's no things on here for where he was in the room or where he was gambling or any of that other stuff. Just the limited perspective of the staff. And the ultimate question that I was trying to answer, or one of them anyway, were things like, okay, who do we have testimony for and who don't we? What's missing? What was included? If you look at the days, is there a specific pattern as to why some stuff may have been included and some stuff wasn't? A primary example is there's 3 times at which Paddock had food delivered to his room, and for 2 of them we have some sort of testimony, or at least a summary of their testimony. But for the other, which occurred on the 29th, yes, we're back to the 29th, there's no summary or description from the persons who delivered the food on late evening of the 29th to Paddock's room 134. And so you ask the question, why? And that's the type of thing that I'm looking for in this case. Along the way, of course, we can do let's just let this thing roll. Generally speaking, stuff in orange is stuff that occurred, up close to the room, and stuff in yellow is stuff which happened, interactions that happened down at the casino level or below. In the middle of this one big chart are, of course, the time scales divided up into, hourly basis. And the blue lines across indicate 3-hour divisions of time for easy placement and location of things. At the top of the screen, you'll see a division a timeline divided into days, both with the date and the day. The information on that timeline is kind of dated, but it's there for me to keep a perspective on what's happening. At the bottom of the big chart here, I've summarized the members of staff that were referenced during the time scale for that day. All right, let's move forward. What's the first thing I want to talk about here? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is when things occurred. Check-in was at 11, so I put a big red line across there. Checkout is at 3 p.m. at the Mandalay Bay. Of course, there are some exceptions, but by and large, this is what it is. And after we put those lines there, and we start looking at the regions in which activity occurs, and then we start marking, well, where did Paddock check into rooms? He checked into room there on the 25th, there on the 29th, and then he visited the VIP on the 30th in the mornings with some strange activity. So right away we begin to see some patterns here. We begin to see that after the green line, after the check-in time, is when the regular room check-ins occurred. We can also see that most of the activity is below the red line, which you would expect since room preparation for people checking in the afternoon probably occurs, after the last guest checked out, which if checkout time is 11 a.m., then that's the time between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. is when the hotel has to get the rooms ready. And in both cases, in this case, rooms 134 and 135, that is when the preparation occurred, with a couple small exceptions. And not uncharacteristic, most of the activity from the staff and Paddock, to a large degree, occurred after 11 a.m. and predominantly past the check-in time after 3 p.m. But, between 11 and 3, Paddock was occasionally busy. For example, he had, ate lunch quite often in that time frame. So on the bottom we see a pattern of high activity, and up at the top we'll see a pattern of low activity. And the immediate question is why? To some extent, it's because I haven't included in this chart the activities associated with gambling. And as we know, Paddock was wont to gamble during the midnight hours, shall we speak, and when he got tired of gambling after 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, he'd go back to his room and had a habit of sleeping. Now that's not to say that every hour of every day during this time frame was spent sleeping, but that's his habit. And so we've got two factors going on there that leads naturally to a low period of low activity between midnight and 11 a.m. So let's start making individual observations. We'll start with the one that I've made earlier, is that room preparation occurred between the hours of 11 and 3, and for Paddock there were precisely 2 room preparations, one for room 135 on the 25th and one for room 134 on the 29th. In both cases, the preparation was done by 2 guest room attendants, Z6220 and Z7-UP1. The first being is a guest room attendant, and the second is some sort of utility person. And they seemed, in the limited cases that we've seen, to work in a pair. And for the whole week, Paddock had his rooms cleaned, outside of the preparation, of course, precisely twice. One on Wednesday the 27th and once on Friday the 29th. In the case of the 27th, it occurred, or in the afternoon about 5 o'clock. In the case of the and it occurred, later in the day on the 27th, and during the time at which the housekeeper took close to an hour there in the room, he also had the food delivery made, and both of those are documented in the FIT report. The lady doing the cleaning, her last name was Gamboa, and the guy doing the food delivery is Hernandez. Not so typical is the room cleaning that occurred on the 29th. Now this is room 135, which occurred immediately after the preparation for room 34 was completed and was done by guest room attendant Z6220. So Z6220 has that person has their fingers in quite a bit of activity. They prepared room 135, they prepared room 134, and they did an additional cleaning on room 135. And so you have to ask, well, is this a shift thing or a functionality thing? And it's not clear to me. I believe that Gamboa on the 27th comes on shift after 2 o'clock, perhaps even as late as 3. And so it could be more of a shift thing than not. But we don't have the testimony from Z6220, so we'll never know. The entries made via the valet and the exits made via the valet are many. And here you can see that I've marked them all down, and every day but the 29th has one or more valet visits. The days between the 25th and the 28th are when the bellhop was used. It was used precisely 3 times, once on the 25th, once on the 26th, and once on the 28th, all in the last, well, not all, 2 of them in the last 3 hours of the day, and the first one on the 25th immediately after check-in, as he moved his car from self-park to the valet, and then got a bellhop to assist him, Morales in fact, up to his room. Curiously enough, or oddly enough, the way things happened on the 25th is different than the way that they happened on the 26th. The 26th showed this strict pattern of you drive in, somebody meets you at the valet, they take your registration and all that, and a different person helps you unload the bags and puts them onto the bellhop's cart and rolls it over to the service elevator, then hands off that bellhop rig to another person who then completes the trip up to your room. And on the 26th, the person completing the trip to the room from the service elevator casino level floor was Kaleem. Torres and Cruz were correspondingly the valet and person unloading. The 28th, we don't know, because there's no testimony for that. And that's an ongoing controversy, which I'll get into in another video. So we have 3 bellhop trips, and we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different times that Paddock used the valet. Some of those were exits, but even during the exiting of the hotel, you have to give your ticket to the cashier, and somebody has to go get the car. So, there's quite a few people involved for every comings and goings through the valet, even if you don't have a bellhop attendant. So, lots of people. And most of those aren't listed here because I have never did any exploration into who the people who park the car, retrieve the car, or who the cashiers are. And those are all people who certainly could have interacted with Paddock, certainly could have given a testimony regarding the state of the interior of the car, and maybe they would have been useful, maybe not. All right, so we got the valet and bellhop. Now, the next thing we want to cover is food, because everybody has certain requirements. We all eat, sleep, and mess around. And by mess around, I mean anything not eating or sleeping. So when did Paddock eat, and when did he sleep, and who did he interact with? Well, in this case, we have him on 5 different occasions eating lunch. On every day that he was at the hotel, he had something to eat, except for the 28th, and that's because he wasn't there, and the 26th he wasn't there. So every time Paddock was at the hotel for any period of time, he ate lunch. And you can see that immediately from this chart. When he ate it very slightly, the predominant time is right around noon. And the lesser time is, in, say, 3 to 4 time, in the afternoon between 1500 and 1800 hours. The times at which the Fit Report records entries for these people are quite a few. But then again, let me cover that a little bit later when I show you exactly who does and does not have testimony. So we have a total of 5 lunch times that he ate. So when did he eat dinner? Well, the only time that I can see that he ate dinner is when he had food delivered on the 29th, close to prior to midnight. All the other times he was either not in the hotel or he didn't have dinner, which, I'll have to do considerable more investigation into the Ogden and Mesquite and all that time to determine when it was possible that he ate dinner. But for example, when he leaves on the 25th and drives to Mesquite. If it takes him more than an hour and 15 minutes to get there, if it takes him, let's say, 2 hours, then he probably had some dinner. But I haven't compiled those charts yet. So far we have him at the hotel eating 6 times. 5 lunches and 1 dinner. I suspect there were others that aren't included in the fit report. All right. In looking at the 29th, and this chart really has been developed after I started investigating the 29th, the Friday, you come to the area during the afternoon where room 134 is prepared, and it's prepared at 1:30 and lasts until 2. But then immediately after that's done, the utility guy is come and gone, and the Z6220 person jumps over to room 135 and does the cleaning. It doesn't take her too long, 20-30 minutes. And then that is the last cleaning, the last person from Mandalay Bay to have access to the insides of room 135. So on Friday, from middle of Friday till the end of the shooting, no Mandalay Bay staff had access to room 135. Now, you'd think that would have testimony associated with it, but it doesn't. And since most of the testimony that we've seen from these people, the cops directly led people into saying everything looked normal, nothing to see here, move along, nobody in the room with him, he ate alone, he slept alone, the bags didn't look abnormal, But on Friday, he was done bringing in all of his major bags. All 3 Bellhops had done, and he still had the ammo bags to bring in, but all the 3, he had at least 15, let's say, bags in there by the time that Z7 or Z6220 was cleaning the room. And we know that she changed the sheets and did other things. Surely she would have an opportunity to assess both the state of Paddock and the state of the room, and probably could shed some valuable light onto what was happening inside the room. Also, there are some early morning activities on the 29th that were undocumented in the fit report that probably changed the state of the room. He either had a guest, or she could have told us if the refrigerator had been delivered by then, or if the sheets were extraordinarily, messy, or, Coke cans lying around, or whatever. But it raises a flag for me that so much of the testimony from the staff for the 29th is gone. Now, the 2 people that we do have testimony for, of course, are Holdridge, who, was in room 134 only for a few minutes, checking out the stink, and then from the person downstairs at the noodle shop saying that Paddock ate at the noodle shop. And I think this chart may be wrong. I think the noodle shop is on the 30th, so don't take that written in stone. I may have just found a small error, I think, which would mean that he ate sushi. Kion. Let's go look. See if I got that wrong. On the 29th, sushi. I got it wrong. So this chart was backwards. This should read sushi, and this one should read noodle. Okay, I'll note that in the corrections. But anyway, the last staff to have access to room 135 occurred on Friday during the middle of the day, and that was Z6220. Similarly, we can ask who had the last access to room 134, and that would be on the 1st over there when food delivery again for lunch was made to room 134. So from mid-afternoon Friday to mid-afternoon Sunday, only 2 people well, I can't really say that. 3 people actually, because there was a barkeep in between there. So we had 3 people from Friday to Sunday who had access. 2 of them, the barkeep and the food delivery, occurred into room 134, and the other one occurred on room 135, which was the cleaning by Z6220. Makes you think, doesn't it? That made me think. Now, in looking at the 2 times that the room were cleaned, we've already said that the Z6220 doesn't have testimony. That means that only one of the cleaners does, and that would be Gamboa on the Wednesday when Hernandez was delivering food. She's the only food cleaner to have public testimony. And then, of course, the only food delivery person without public testimony. Remember, there were 3 food deliveries, one on the Wednesday, one on the Sunday, and one on the Friday. And only the one on the Friday doesn't have summary or testimony in the FIT report. Curious. You see, just too much stuff missing from the 29th to be slacking or coincidental. All right. Now we're going to take a look at the whole week at a glance, and we're going to ask which activities have testimony, which don't, and how are they different. Okay, so the ones with activity are the ones now listed down below on the bottom. And as you can see, they're kind of sparse. So let's move on to which ones didn't have testimony. Activities without testimony. And here we see that there's a few more that don't have than did. Okay, well, that's kind of hard to see. So let's go ahead and make a different view of this so that we can see it real graphically. And first we'll start and we'll pan through both all combinations of does and doesn't have testimony, and the red blocks indicate people with no testimony. The green blocks indicate places where there was testimony. And first we start with the red. Those are the places that don't have testimony, leaving the ones that do. All right. And then we'll combine both of them so that we can compare them. Greens are the ones that do. Now I missed the thing over there on the right on the food they have, so that should have been marked green. And oh yeah, on Thursday the 28th, that thing with down there at the 21 to 2200 hours should have been more red than green, because there is no testimony from any bellhop, valet, or luggage loader that says they assisted Paddock on that day. But in fact, it kind of looks very similar to the sequence that happened on the 26th. And if I were a betting man, I would say what happened on the 26th was replicated on the 28th. Torres, Cruz, and then a third person who actually made their way up to the room. I'm not real sure because the video doesn't really show a good picture of that person. All right, so there it is. And there we have the ones with testimony blocked off in green, so we can now see the ones that don't, with the mistake over there on the food. And now we're back to the whole chart. All right, so what does this tell us overall? Well, it says that, more than 50. Well, let's just get into the summary. I'll just leave this here for a moment, so if you want to look at it and ask some questions later, you can. But now let's get to the summary. In creating this chart, I created it because I was frustrated. And I was frustrated because I was doing research on the 29th, and I couldn't take the information in the FIT report and come up with a conclusive answer. Even after adding the images and the LRR, I still could not come up with a conclusive story on a few things. And so I started asking the bigger question, what would have happened if we followed the habit and patterns either from the staff or from Paddock? Can we answer it that way? And so I created the chart. If we look at who does and does not have testimony on the chart, more than half doesn't. So there's more people without testimony than there is with. Now, that's not to say that the people with or without the testimony are more or less important. It's just kind of a qualitative feel to say that we've got a lot of stuff missing. And when you look at the days on which they're missing, you naturally get into the days in which there was a lot of preparation and cleaning for the rooms, in addition to the fact that on the 29th, Paddock was in the hotel all day, and so there would be more activity associated with that, whereas on the other days there was more activity associated with the valets. Now, some of the most critical stuff is missing, and well, I'll cover which ones are critical later in a different video. But overall, at a quick glance, this chart provides a nice view of many things that you can't get by focusing on one day. And while the chart's not complete and has a few mistakes, it is a very useful chart, and I give it out freely to all my viewers to, or I give permission for my viewers to use it as they feel fit. All right, so that pretty much covers this chart of Mandalay Bay staff activity from the perspective of the shooting and Stephen Paddock. So I'm pretty much done, and we'll catch you in the next one.